The Eden to Eternity Bible Study for January 13th, 2024. And we are on day 13 of our study, and I'm going to call this study from riches to rags. And today's reading was Job chapters 28 through 30. I'm including through 31 in this study in this video, because in 32 we start to see a new character in the book of Job. So I want to start there on the next video. Today I'm going to read um, from Job chapters 29 and 30. And we're going to read these two chapters to compare and contrast Job's prosperity to his um, poor, loss, and how he became poor. So the question we are asking ourselves and thinking about while we're reading and studying these two chapters is, how will this experience help Job in his ministry? So we're going to start reading, and this will be probably a shorter video because I'm at work tonight, so I don't have as much time. Job chapter 29, verses 1 through 25. We're going to read and talk about it if I feel led to as we go. So it says, Job continued speaking. I long for the years gone by when God took care of me. This is the NLT translation. When he lit up the way before me, and I walked safely through the darkness. When I was in my prime, God's friendship was felt in my home. The Almighty was still with me, and my children were around me. My steps were awash in cream, and the rocks gushed olive oil for me. So he's talking about before he was afflicted, he felt God's presence in his life, God's protection, and he's remembering the things that he had going good for him then. Those were the days when I went to the city gate and took my place among the honored leaders. The young stepped aside when they saw me, and even the aged rose in respect at my coming. The princes stood in silence and put their hands over their mouths. The highest officials of the city stood quietly, holding their tongues in respect. All who heard me praised me. All who saw me spoke well of me, for I assisted the poor in their need, and the orphans who required help. I helped those without hope, and they blessed me. And I caused the widows' hearts to sing for joy. So he's describing himself as a minister. He was ministering to the people who were less fortunate than he was at that time when he was in his time of prosperity. So he was doing the work that God gave him to do. And he's saying this to his three friends who have treated him terribly in his affliction and his suffering. So he's kind of defending himself in a way to them about how they're treating them and trying to get them to see their fault. Everything I did was honest. Righteousness covered me like a robe, and I wore justice like a turban. I served as eyes for the blind and feet for the lame. I was a father to the poor and assisted strangers who needed help. I broke the jaws of godless oppressors and plucked their victims from their teeth. I thought, surely I will die surrounded by my family after a long, good life. For I am like a tree whose roots reach the water, whose branches are refreshed with the dew. New honors are constantly bestowed on me, and my strength is continually renewed. Everyone listened to my advice. They were silent as they waited for me to speak. And after I spoke, they had nothing to add, for my counsel satisfied them. They longed for me to speak as people long for rain. They drank my words like a refreshing spring rain. When they were discouraged, I smiled at them. My look of approval was precious to them. Like a chief, I told them what to do. I lived like a king among his troops and comforted those who mourned. So, Job is recalling the goodness that he experienced of God before all this calamity had fallen on him. And he's saying this to his three friends who have ridiculed him, mocked him, blamed him for his own suffering, trying to tell him he sinned against God, and this is what caused his suffering. And he's recalling to reminding them of who he was before, and reminding himself of that. And he's sharing his ministry with us so that we can see that he was trying to do good. And this is why, partially why God said that he was blameless. He helped poor people, blind people, lame people. He helped the needy. He helped widows. He gave wise counsel to the people who were doing well, and they listened to him and soaked it up. Like, you know, it says, "Drink my words like a refreshing spring rain." I mean, that's beautiful imagery he's given here of how well respected of a man he was. And I think one of these verses he said, surely I thought I would die surrounding my family after a long, good life. So that verse speaks to me and says, we see our future as if our present wouldn't end. But what we don't know is what God has planned for us. So we like to determine what our future is going to look like based on what we're seeing our present look like. And we have to be careful of that, because if we do that, we could easily fall into this deep state of depression when things don't go our way, instead of trusting that God knows what's best for us. And when bad things happen, God has a purpose for it. And by the end of this study, Job believes at this point in time that his life is over. He's ruined. It will never be better again. He's just about to die. We're going to see that here in a minute. But at the end of the book, it says Job lives 140 more years after this. So we don't know what God has prepared for us or planned for us in the future. And if we base our future based on our present circumstances, we can either be falsely positive or falsely negative instead of trusting God. And that's kind of where Job is after you read this next chapter, you'll see. So now we're in Job chapter 30, verses 1 through 31. He says, "But now I am mocked by people younger than I, by young men whose fathers are not worthy to run with my sheepdogs." Man, that's a harsh statement. By young men whose fathers are not worthy to run with my sheepdogs. A lot of good they are to me, those worn out wretches. They are gaunt from poverty and hunger. They claw the dry ground in desolate wastelands. They pluck wild greens from among the bushes and eat from the roots of broom trees. They are driven from human society, and people shout at them as if they were thieves. So now they live in frightening ravines, in caves among the rocks. They sound like animals howling among the bushes, huddled together beneath the nettles. They are nameless fools, outcast from society. Now we're beginning to see how Job is looking at the people who were mocking him, who are less fortunate than he used to be. So begin to see that he may not be learning from his own humility fully yet. And now they mock me with he's really speaking out of pain here, so maybe I misspoke there. And now they mock me with vulgar songs. They taunt me. They despise me and won't come near me except to spit in my face. For God has cut my bowstring, he has humbled me, so they have thrown off all restraint. These outcasts oppose me to my face. They send me sprawling and lay traps in my path. They block my road and do everything they can to destroy me. They know I have no one to help me. They come at me from all directions. They jump on me when I am down. I live in terror now. My honor has blown away in the wind, and my prosperity has vanished like a cloud. So he's talking about people who are treating him badly because of his circumstances. And I believe what he can learn from this, if he allows himself to, is he can learn how to relate to people who are being treated bad because of they are less fortunate or their circumstances. So now he might be able to relate to them better after this. So that's one way maybe this experience can help Job in his ministry. He was already doing good, but he can even have more compassion and more grace to those who are less fortunate. Verse 16, and now my life seeps away. Depression haunts my days. At night my bones are filled with pain, which gnaws at me relentlessly. With a strong hand, God grabs my shirt. He grips me by the collar of my coat. He has thrown me into the mud. I'm nothing more than dust and ashes. So now he's blaming God for his circumstances. And he just doesn't understand the full picture. He believes God's sovereign. And because God's sovereign, everything happens because it's God's will and plan. And that's not 100% true. God's plan for us and will for us is not to suffer, but because original sin from Adam and Eve brought sin into the world, we suffer, but it's not because that was God's plan for us. It's the consequence of sin and God helping us to get where, like I said yesterday, God helping us to get where he wants us to be in our relationship with him. I cry to you, God, but you don't answer. I stand before you, but you don't even look. You have become cruel towards me. You use your power to persecute me. You throw me into the whirlwind and destroy me in the storm. And I know you are sending me to my death, the destination of all who live. So there's what I said earlier, is he feels like he's going to die any moment now. Surely no one would turn against the needy when they cry for help in their trouble. Did I not weep for those in trouble? Was I not deeply grieved for the needy? So I looked for good, but evil came instead. I waited for the light, but darkness fell. So he has an expectation of what his life was supposed to be like, and this isn't it. That's what that verse means. My heart is troubled and restless. Days of suffering torment me. I walk in gloom without sunlight. I stand in the public square and cry for help. Instead, I am considered a brother to jackals and a companion to owls. My skin has turned dark, and my bones burn with fever. My heart plays sad music, and my flute accompanies those who weep. So now he's went from the riches down to the rags, and he has nothing. He's depressed. He's being mistreated, and he's miserable. And that's where he's at. So how will this experience help Job in his ministry? Once he gets on the other side of it, he knows what it's like to be in both circumstances. So not only can he have compassion to the poor, but he can help the rich learn how to have compassion too. And he can relate personally to people in a way that he couldn't before. So if you were going through a divorce, for example, another Christian who's been through that before, who you can talk to about it, can understand what you're going through, and you can relate to them, and they can relate to you, and you can minister to each other. So having this experience, even though it's bad in the moment, God can use to help us better serve Him and minister to others in a way that's um, more useful to Him and His kingdom. And in chapter 31, verses 16 through 23, I'm going to read those. And he's asking questions. Have I refused to help the poor or crushed the hopes of widows? Have I been stingy in my food and refused to share it with orphans? No, from childhood I have cared for orphans like a father, and all my life I've cared for widows. Whenever I saw the homeless without clothes and the needy with nothing to wear, did they not praise me for providing wool clothing to keep them warm? If I raised my hand against an orphan, knowing that judges would take my side, then let my shoulder be wrenched out of place, and let my arm be torn from its socket. That would be better than facing God's judgment. For if the majesty of God opposes me, what hope is there? So he shows us here that he is, in the past he has seen himself as a minister to people less fortunate. So now what he's expecting from his friends is to them to treat him and his calamity and misfortune the way he has treated others. And they're not doing that. So he's speaking out his mind on this matter and trying to get them to see the error of their ways. So I want to take us to New Testament and see what Apostle Paul said in Philippians 4:10 through 13, and show how Paul even said something similar about how how he's learned in his ministry. Philippians 4:10. But I rejoiced in the Lord greatly that now at last you have revived your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned before, but you lacked opportunity. Not that I speak from want, for I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I am. I know how to get along with humble means, and I also know how to live in prosperity. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of being filled and going hungry, both of having abundance and suffering needs. Now look at what he says in 13. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. It's talking about Christ. So God uses the negative circumstances to teach us to rely on his strength to get us through those things. And when we learn that lesson, then we can say what Apostle Paul says here. I know how to survive in all circumstances because I have faith in God, and I know he is trustworthy. I've experienced that. His provision in my time of need. I've experienced his comfort in my time of mourning. So I know who he is because of my suffering, and that I trusted him and relied on him, and that drew me closer to him. And that's the purpose, is God's helping us learn how to be better ministers and know him more. And sometimes he has to use suffering to do that. So there's an addition to the last video I made about suffering. So that's what I got for Job chapters 28 through 31. I hope you guys have a blessed night. God bless.